All right, folks, so today we are going to bottle or can ground moose meat. Now, this is a process that honestly I used to think was stupid, I used to think it was a waste of time, and I honestly thought it was kind of gross to think of bottled meat. It just didn't seem palatable. But I have become a huge convert to this over the last 3 years. We shoot a lot of wild game in a year with venison, with bear, with moose, and all the wild game stuff, the birds and everything. We have a lot of meat, and so we were in a beneficial position of being able to try different stuff, and frankly, venison was just my least favorite. So we wanted to try to find better ways to use it up, and so that's what got me onto canning, and I've got to tell you, it has become a game changer for us, and I'm going to explain to you why. First of all, if you've ever had a freezer go down without you knowing it, and you've lost the meat, or all of the freezer contents, you will know the pain that causes. You will know the expense that causes. Well, guess what? When you pressure can or bottle your meat, it is shelf stable for years, many, many years. So it's a huge advantage. It takes space out of your freezer, it is shelf stable, and that alone is 2 great reasons to do this. I think that alone is well worth it. Having cooked meat at the ready on a shelf that is shelf stable, you don't have to heat it up. It's already cooked. You open a bottle, you come home from work late, you open a bottle, you can either eat it at room temperature or you can warm it up, put it in a stew, put it in a lasagna, put it in a fajitas or burritos. The list is endless of what you can do with this meat, and it's all ready to go. So that's a huge factor. So out in front of me here, I've got these All-American pressure canners. I have definitely grown to love these. In my opinion, they are the best on the market for a number of reasons. You can test it out for yourself if you want. I'll have a link in our video description where you can go to the website, check all these pressure canners out, and I would highly encourage you to buy one of these. They will last you forever. In fact, they'll become heirlooms in your family. They'll last that long. So we've got 3 different sizes here, and I think it's important for you to understand the difference. Number 1, this one here would be kind of a pressure canner / cooker. This one's also very useful for if you pull a roast out of the freezer, it's still rock solid frozen. You can throw it in here, and within like 90 minutes to 100 minutes, you've got a tender, pull it apart with a fork roast ready to go, ready to eat. Absolutely fantastic method of cooking on the fly. It also is good for canning. If you're canning, it will handle 4 quart jars. So it's a small canner. When you're doing things like moose, deer, bear, when you're doing large amounts all at once, this is when you start to really get into these larger sizes and when they really shine. This one here is the 930. This one can handle 2 layers of 7 jars. So 14 jars we can fit in here, which truthfully, most of the time, we shoot Canadian deer, they're large bodied, they're big animals. I can usually fit 1 full deer, minus the back straps and maybe a couple of the best roasts. I can fit 1 full deer into one of these. Fantastic, gets it all done in one shot. The 941, this is your real big beast. This one will handle 20 quart jars. 20 quart jars. So this one can handle a lot. If you have a large harvest, whether it's fruits, vegetables, or meats, and you need to do a lot down all at once, this one is really gonna shine for you. So we're now gonna take you into the video portion where we're gonna show you how you can all by yourself can and bottle ground moose meat. All right, so we got our grill getting all warmed up. This grill is absolutely key to the whole process in my opinion. Right now, I'm cooking outside, which makes it so much nicer inside your kitchen. I'm gonna be able to do 14 pounds of ground meat all in one cook, which is a big deal when you compare like a couple pounds to an electric fry pan. So that's why I've pulled the Camp Chef out. It's a 3-burner Camp Chef stove with the full blacktop griddle. So we're getting it warmed up. It's actually getting pretty warm right now. I'm getting some oil on it just because this one's not seasoned super well. So I'm just getting a little bit of oil there. Actually, I've already got a bit on there, and let me get this smoothed out. Just because, yeah, the blacktop here isn't seasoned super well, so I need it to be nice and well lubricated here, and then we're gonna get our ground meat going on top of it now as well. So the goal here is just par cooking. In other words, we're really only doing this for the sole purpose of when this goes in the bottle, it's already got slightly cooked edges, so it'll help it to maintain its hamburger or ground beef shape. Otherwise, if you put this in completely raw, 100% raw, it'll go into the jar and it'll just kind of solidify and congeal all in there. So when it comes time to pull it out, it'll resemble more like dog food than it will ground beef or ground meat. So right now, all I'm doing is just, I'm trying to get it as even as possible. As you can see, it's pretty thick. I got 14 pounds on here. So I'm trying to keep it flipping and rotating so that I'm just browning it lightly, never cooking any parts, you know, too well through, and then kind of chopping as I go, trying to keep my big chunks down. Because otherwise, if it's got a lot of big chunks, you'll have a hard time getting it all packed in nice and tight into your jars. So you kind of want it to be broken up like you would, you know, for taco meat or something like that. So we're just gonna keep finishing this up here. It shouldn't take a whole lot longer. Once we do this, we're gonna put it into our meat container. We're gonna have another 14 pounds that we're gonna do the exact same thing for, and then we're gonna get into the kitchen for bottling. Now, some people like to season it at this stage. I personally do not, and I'll tell you why. If you season it at this stage, you run the risk of potentially ruining it or doing it in a way that doesn't suit how you're going to use it later. I prefer that as I pull this out of the jar and I put it into whatever I'm putting it into, that's when I season it to taste. I'm not cooking this all the way. So normally if I'm doing ground beef for tacos or anything, I'm going to season it to taste, and I'm going to eat it as I'm seasoning it to make sure it's exactly what I want. Well, I'm not doing that with this partially cooked stuff. So again, that's why I would recommend, I know it's a long-winded explanation, but I personally recommend not seasoning it now. I think it leaves your options way more open and also makes this process so much simpler. So we'll finish this up and then we'll be in the kitchen. All right, so we're just about done our second batch. This is 28 pounds of ground moose meat now. You know, one of the tricks, I shouldn't say trick, I don't know if it is a trick. To know when you're finished is kind of tricky. I don't really, you know, again, remember, you're just par cooking. You're not trying to get it a full cook all the way through. So having some red meat is perfectly okay during this time. So you just want to you're trying to get most of it browned to get the nice browned texture so that it doesn't all clump up when it's in the bottle. Let's head to the kitchen now. We'll get them in the bottles. You can use this Camp Chef machine for your canning heat source. You can put the All-American cookers right on top of it. However, the temperatures are dropping pretty fast right now, and I think we'll get a much better, quicker cook if we go inside. So we're gonna head into the kitchen and we'll start these, getting them into the jars and getting them ready for the canner. Let's go. So we've brought our meat into the kitchen here, and we have already actually gone ahead and packed it into the jars. Just to save time, it's really a boring process. There's not really much for you to see. Really, you're just scooping your meat in, and I find that you should be able to get 2 pounds of ground meat into a quart jar. If you're using pints, you should expect about 1 pound. It really does work out pretty closely to that amount. What we found though was the first time I ever tried it, I had to really pack it in there. If you don't pack it, it just goes in so fluffy that you'll get like a third of the amount that you need. So as you do it, keep packing it in, get it in nice and tight, and then you'll get your 2 pounds to a quart and 1 pound to a pint. What you're really looking for though when you're packing is you don't want to go above where the neck, or where the shoulders turn into the neck. So you're trying to stay below that line. I hope you can see that right there. But that's essentially what you want. Don't go where it starts to go vertical and rise up into the threaded portion of the glass. That's essentially a full jar. When you finish this, you will see that it will shrink somewhat. You'll create a whole bunch of juice inside of it. That's all normal. That's what you should expect. But by packing it more full, it does have less trapped air. Less, you know, it should stay and preserve so much longer. So I've already sealed these ones. I just left this one off just to show you the final process. We always take vinegar on a paper towel, clean the rim off just to make sure it's clean of any oils or materials for a matter, and then put your cap on. You want to kind of just lightly finger tight it and then back it off kind of a little bit, maybe an eighth of a turn or quarter of a turn. And that's it. They're all ready to go. So another tip, we have already had our pressure cooker on the stove warming up for the last little while. So we've already put our 2 to 3 inches of water as recommended by the manufacturer. We've got our first bottom plate in there, and so we're all set to start putting it in. Now remember, the water's already warming up. So you do want to be careful. If your jars were ever really cold, you don't want to be putting the really cold jars into really hot water. So you don't want to warm it up too far in advance, but we've just started the process. It's nice and warm. Otherwise, you can end up with some cracked jars. So this Model 930 is good for 14 quarts. So what we're going to get is we're going to get 7 quarts all along the bottom row. And then after we complete our bottom row, we'll put another one of these discs on, these spacers, and then we can do 7 more quarts on the top row. So you can get a lot in it. Other times we're going to show you the 941, and it is a beast, but you can get 20 quarts in that one. So when you're doing species like moose, or just, you know, it's harvest season and you got lots to do and you want to save time, these bigger units make a huge difference. So I love them. I mean, I can do a whole deer, an entire deer in this 930, which is, I think, pretty awesome as far as using my time wisely. I do recommend that you put a little bead of olive oil onto the rim, this beveled edge here of the canner. Just, it's not, they don't say very much, you don't need a lot, but just to make it so it's just wet. And remember, all Americans are a complete metal on metal seal, no rubber gaskets. So this is where I think the oil is just a bit of a help to create a nice, good, tight seal with that metal to metal. To be honest, I've done it before without it, before I knew that this was what they recommended. And it does work, but I think this is, you know, it's their recommendation, so I think it's the best way to go. Obviously for safety reasons and making sure that it all works proper. So, we've oiled our bevel edge. We want to make sure the gauge is facing forward, which means that our logo points out, our arrow lines up with our bevel. You'll see that they have these locking lids here, so as you turn it, this one locks into place. There's another one over here, another one over here, so there's 3 of them. That's, again, for safety. And then, as you are ready to seal this down, you want to make sure that you're doing it evenly. So this is where you, just like tightening the lug nuts on a tire, you start on opposite sides with each other and just try to keep them going down evenly. I don't even fully crank one side down. I kind of do it in 2 stages. So I've got both sides kind of coming down somewhat evenly here. I have not tightened these as tight as they'll go. I'm only kind of snugging them all up. Once I get them all snug, then I will go back around and snug everything fully. So let me just take a look here on this one. Yeah, that's all good. Okay, so I've snugged them all up. Now I'm going to go back around and I'm going to really tighten them down. You're not trying to kill it. These are plastic handles, metal thread, but you just want to get it so that they don't turn. Okay, so now it's a bit of a waiting game. So now the process is, we've got our heat cranked up high. We now need to wait for this to boil. You'll know it's going to boil because you'll start to hear the steam coming out this release valve. You won't see any pressure build because everything's just popping out of there. So once you've let it build for, I think it's 10 minutes or so, 5 to 10 minutes, then you put your weights on. So our elevation, where we are now, we use 10 psi. So eventually, once we're ready, we're going to put this weight on, and you'll start to see our pressure build, and it'll build to 10. And then through the process, we need 90 minutes for a quart jar, 75 minutes for a pint jar. And so for our 90 minutes, we will be in here and we'll constantly be kind of adjusting this temperature. Usually we're just kind of backing it off as we go throughout the cook. Because you don't want this thing to just be rattling like crazy. You want to, have a nice even little rattle. And if your temperature gets too hot, that's where you'll just start to rattle like mad, and it's just you're boiling it too hard. And then we'll take it to that stage, and we'll go from there. So we'll just kind of walk away now, let it sit, and we'll come back here in a minute. All right, so we're well over an hour into our cook, and to be honest, I went and had a shower and got my hair cut, so I might look a little different, shaved even while I've been waiting. But this jiggler rattle that you're hearing is what you want to hear. However, that's rattling a little too much. You want to only hear this 1 to 4 times within a minute. So we're going to back our temperature off a little bit. and it should react to this and slow down this this steam escaping. But if you look, our pressure gauge has been holding steady. To be honest, it's been holding steady really well. So everything's doing its job, but that's a little bit too heavy of a rattle. So we'll let it finish. We got less than 20 minutes left, and we'll come back when it's time to turn it off and the next step. So we hit our 90 minutes time limit, and we unplugged it, turned it all off, and we've given it time to cool. It is important that it cools, naturally, but you can tell this has obviously stopped rattling. If I bounce this when there's pressure in it, usually it'll escape. And also I can tell the pressure gauge reads 0. So my next step, this is gonna be really hot, so I got a glove on. I'm gonna pull this off. There's nothing coming out of it. So that tells me that the pressure's gone. Reads 0, nothing coming out of there, tells me it's now safe to open it up. So if you're ever worried about knowing that when it's safe, those are your 2 indicators. Now we start to loosen these off. They can be a little warm too. They're not bad because they're plastic, but if you find them too warm, you can always use an oven mitt. And we gotta turn this, pull it off. And there we go. So, you can see they're still boiling away, quite rapidly in fact. So I'm gonna take them out of here and put them on this cutting board. And this is where they are gonna sit until they cool. So you do wanna be careful. These are coming out still boiling. They're so hot that if you put them on like a cold stone surface, you can sometimes have problems with glass breaking. So that's why the wood is good. These all look really good. Maybe a tiny bit of siphoning on this one. Siphoning is just when some of the juices from inside the bottle siphon out. It's fairly common, not usually a big problem. I'll pull these out and we'll just let them sit. So just as another tip, you cannot tell if they are sealed yet. So if you're looking at your jars and you're saying the buttons haven't dimpled, that's normal. They shouldn't have dimpled yet. So what will happen is as they cool, that's when the suction happens, when they get pulled in, and that's when you should start to hear the pop, and that's how you know that they're sealing. So it's not until they've fully cooled, and you need to give them lots of time to cool. Some people say 24 hours. But I would definitely give it a lot of time till it's lost all of its heat before you play with them, adjust them, test them, anything. Just leave them sit. Don't do anything with them. If it's cold in your room, you might even want to throw a towel over top of these just to kind of allow the temperatures to be a little more subtle. You don't want drastic changes in temperature because that's where your glass again can break. So the house is pretty warm right now, so I'm not worried about it. I'm not going to cover it up, but if your room was really cold, you might want to do it. So one of them actually just popped. So again, we'll leave them now. We'll let them all cool down and just enjoy watching the bubbles as they continue to boil away. But this is basically it. We're done, and we're just going to wait till they've cooled down, and we'll go check all of our seals, make sure they're all done, and then they can be put away in the cellar. All right. Hope you've enjoyed it.
Hey folks, hope you enjoyed that video. Please hit the like button, comment, as we'd love to know how you felt about it. And if you'd like more great Canadian adventures, please subscribe and hit the notification button so you don't miss any new content coming out. And as always, our amazing outdoor adventures are shared on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Please come along for the adventure. We'd absolutely love to have you along for the ride.